So, having watched those couple of videos, I'm now going to emphasise a few things and add a little bit more information into the mix in terms of context. In essence, there are two profiling pathways for SDS schools and alternative settings to interact with Morrisby within the My Career Insights programme. One is at the level of elemental aspirations. This is a career interest questionnaire that has a maximum of 72 items and is generally 3 items per scale. If, as an advisor, you're going to do the feedback with the student, it's a really good idea to have a look at the advisor's summary sheet. This is where Morrisby tries to give you some start points in terms of suggestions for subjects, broader study areas and specific careers. And the careers are set at the VCAL Foundation, Cert 1 level, with an apprenticeship traineeship boost. And be aware that with elemental aspirations, no career or subjects are suggested to a student or available online. And that was at the request of SDS Careers Advisors. Now, the other alternative is the optional aptitudes. This starts off with the interest questionnaire, but the students are given the older, more complex questionnaire, so is a maximum of 103 items, generally 4 per scale, and anyone in Year 9 or older will receive this. When they complete, they can do the personality and priorities, but if they are interested in tertiary study, they can also complete an additional study interest questionnaire, specifically aimed at looking at what people would like to study at a degree level. If they do complete additional questionnaires, personality is added to the PDF, but neither priorities nor study interests are. And with the optional aptitudes build, students have access to some interactive elements where you and they can work on some decisions. One is a tab looking at careers, and one is an options at 16 plus tab. And be aware, with optional aptitudes, the student can activate the aptitudes at any time after they've seen their results. You're not in control of that, they choose to do it. And if they do, it's about an hour and a half of hard work before they get to see their results. Now, if you are going to work with the aptitude data, I suggest you consider becoming Morrisby certified. Now, this is a 4+ hour online course. It's interactive, and there are some quizzes and a final multiple choice exam in it, and it's required to work with a full Morrisby profile. It covers a lot of the stuff we've covered today, but in a lot more detail, and a lot of other components which are not addressed in this short course. If you're not going to go there often with the aptitudes, it may not be worthwhile, but if you think you might use the aptitudes on a regular basis, I'd strongly recommend it. If you have the odd student who goes through aptitudes and the other questionnaires, just be aware of your knowledge level before interpreting these elements. I think both the aptitudes and the personality, if used wrongly, and I'm sure you wouldn't, but they can do some harm, and that's the last thing we want to do here. If you'd like to complete that full certification course, just contact Career Analysts. Now, with the questionnaire, I mentioned there is either 3 or 4 items. This is very simply how it works. So this is the care scale and a definition here. If you go online, you can click and get the definition. Simpler items and 1 less than with the main questionnaire. The questionnaires are what we call partially adaptive. That's a bit like having a conversation with somebody. So if you say a couple of times, I love that, they'll keep asking, they'll keep trying to get the detail of what you like. But if students start saying, no, I don't like that, I don't like that, the last thing we want to do is keep going and say, you sure you don't like it? Or what about this? And they'll keep saying, no, I don't like that. Leaves a bad taste in the mouth. So the way the system works is when students are negative in their responses, then less questions are asked. That can go from 72 down to a minimum of 49 for elemental, and from 103 down to 57 for aspirations. But the reality is a lot of students aren't that negative. They might say they don't like the first question, but they really like the second one. So we are then going to ask them the remaining 2. It would only be if they disliked 3, we'd say there's no point asking the 4th one. So it's not the case it's either 103 or 57. Some people might have 85 or 92 or whatever in their questionnaire. When students complete the aptitude assessments, I mentioned before it's an hour and a half of hard work. They control whether they click the button or not, but they have to complete all of them before the results are shown. You can't just do the verbal and have a look and see how it has panned out for you and then add in another one. You've got to do all of them before you see your results. So when aptitude data is available, it can be used as a focus on element in the careers tab, and that's often very useful. If we get a decent measure of where someone's strengths are and they tie up with the interests, it's a good thing. But sometimes you do get a situation where the aptitude pattern is suggesting different strengths than the student thinks they have. And again, that can be an interesting discussion. If aptitudes have been completed, you can't turn them off and just ignore them in the future. You can minimise the impact of them by focusing on the other elements, but you can't ever turn them off. So we'll always have a suggestion, so be aware of that. And I mentioned before, if you plan to work with aptitude data, it would make sense to cover that additional training material. So what now? This is quite a short course, but I think probably a good way to get to grips with Morrisby is to do it yourself and then start working with the system with some students. Let your regional coordinator from the CAV know you're ready and work with them to make sure things go smoothly. They may well help you, for example, with a sample feedback to give an example of how you might work with the results. And if you are thinking of working with the aptitude assessments on a regular basis, consider certification. Thank you.